imagine this, you've got this worldwide network, this unique self-symphony Facebook that links people in the field of value. And instead of just top-down government, you have this self-actualizing, self-organizing reality. We have to be able to imagine that. Deepa, welcome everyone. So my suggestion is actually that on this special week, we have my dear interlocutor and dear friend and co-president of the center, Dr. Zach Stein, who's going to be taking a big part of the time talking about AI. I'm going to talk about AI in its first wave, Zach in its second wave, but I really want to focus on the second wave. So my suggestion is, beloveds, we're just going to step in, not with a recording, but with a chant. Then David, you read the code, pass it back to me. I'll do a short piece on the first wave of AI and why it's an existential risk, and then pass it to Zach on the second wave of AI. We've been promising a kind of conversation around AI for a long time. This is not the last one, but it's critical in terms of the work we're doing, because who are we? We're one mountain, many paths. Our commitment as a community is to respond to the meta crisis, through telling a new story of value, rooted in first principles and first values. And we are a church, and we are a synagogue, and we are a secular humanist center, and we are rooted in world philosophy and world religion as a context for our diversity. And AI and how artificial intelligence plays and engages and needs to be responded to from the context of this new story of value is one of the overriding moral demands of this time. So this is, when I'm about to say, it's an incredibly exciting week, not in a titillating way, in a sense of the amazing and unimaginable gravitas, importance of this conversation. And we come to the conversation not just filled with solemnity and seriousness, but also with joy, with celebration, because we can only evolve the source code from a place of celebration, from a place of our mad aliveness, right? We have the holy and the broken hallelujah. We're not just in the tragic, we're in the post-tragic. In the post-tragic, we respond. We're alive, we stand before the mystery, and we respond. David, take us into the code, brother. Thank you.
So here's this week's evolutionary love code. There are two forms of existential risk: the death of humanity and the death of our humanity. Artificial intelligence potentially participates in both. Bringing the creators of AI and the process of developing AI into the field of value is an overriding moral imperative of our time, upon which the future of reality as we know it depends. So I'll read it one more time.
Read it slow, brother. Take us inside with your full heart, David. Take us inside, brother.
There are two forms of existential risk: the death of humanity and the death of our humanity. Artificial intelligence potentially participates in both. Bringing the creators of AI and the process of developing AI into the field of value is an overriding moral imperative of our time, which the future of reality as we know it depends upon. And it's that, with that privilege, I hand my word back to you, Dr. Marc.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. And we're on the inside. We're in this, and maybe we can turn off that mic there. That mic's still on, who's ever still on. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're in what we call the field of value. So we're going to practice as we do every week. This time, we're not going to invoke Leonard Cohen. I'm going to do a short chant, right? And then I'm going to step into this topic and then pass to Zach, okay? So welcome, everyone, with just quivering tenderness, fierce, mad commitment, right? We're going all the way in this lifetime. Welcome to Barbara Marx Hubbard, who's with us every week, who I was privileged to co-found One Mountain with, and would always say, are you willing? Are you willing to go all the way in this lifetime? Okay, here we go. Nimmanananninai, 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 nimmanananna. Hey, around the world, welcome everyone. Hey, ninnanananninai, 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 ninnanananna. Hey, oh. And may our words today be words that emerge from the depth of the silence. Okay, so it's 1:20. We're going to finish, as I said, at 2. And again, just like mad welcome to everyone. This is R1 Mountain. This is the heart of the response, the one heart responding to the meta crisis. We're telling a new story of value. We're not going to engage AI. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the first wave of artificial intelligence. And the way I want to do it at 1:21, right, is I want to actually go back in time a little bit. Okay. The year is 1943. We're in the middle of World War II. And everything I'm about to say is actually going to appear in a critical volume, which our dear friend Aubrey Marcus calls the tip of the spear. This volume is the tip of the spear of the Great Library, which is emergent from the Center for World Philosophy and Religion, which is a kind of invisible college, right? People joining from around the world, coming together to actually articulate this new Great Library. And I want to just find the silence on the inside of the inside and just kind of find ourselves here. So everything we're going to say today is going to appear in this volume. And this volume is about value and the emergence of artificial intelligence and how that potentially participates in the two forms of existential risk, the death of humanity and the death of our humanity, and how to respond, how to transform, right? How to engage, right? This meta crisis, and to actually take us not to dystopia, but to actually the most unimaginably beautiful world that we all already know, right, is possible. So C.S. Lewis. So it's 1943, and C.S. Lewis, and if you see me looking down, I'm actually looking at the time, so I want to make sure that we have enough time here. Okay, so here we go. Okay, I'm madly privileged and excited, right, just to be with everyone. I'm just looking at the chat box, and I want to just talk to every single person. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Here we go. C.S. Lewis. He's in Oxford. He's hanging out with Tolkien, who did Lord of the Rings. We're in the middle of World War II. And C.S. Lewis writes a little 30-page essay. In this 30-page essay, he talks about a world in which he thought governments, that's what he thought, governments would develop omnipotent scientific methods. Governments would develop what he called omnipotent competence. And they would have scientific methods of what he calls control that would actually be able to control the entire environment. And he said that those controllers in the first generation will be motivated by noble concerns. He doesn't use the word, but he basically talks about existential risk, threat to the very existence of the planet. These controllers are going to be the earliest people who see the threat. But these controllers, and now I'm not using his words, I'm using our words, these controllers will be living in their own self-experience outside the field of value. The word that Lewis uses is the Tao, T-A-O, the Tao. And the Tao is an ancient word from one of the great traditions, Taoism. And we're borrowing that word and we're adding to it from many different sources, and we're going to call it the field of value. Now, the truth is, You can never be outside the field of value, just like you can't be outside of space and time in the manifest world. But the controllers will think they're outside of the field of value, and they'll think that actually human personhood, the irreducible dignity of every human being, is actually not real. And that human inherent goodness, not natural goodness, goodness has to be trained, but human inherent goodness is not real. And that hope is not real, right? And that the evolutionary love and eros that animates cosmos is not real. And that actually humanity on this planet in this moment in time is the only life that exists any place in the solar system. And therefore, the only thing we can do to protect this little speck of life, which we're not even sure why it's valuable, but here we are, is to actually control the whole system. Because we don't have now 500 million people like we did 150 years ago. We have, right, we're going close to 10 billion, we're up to 8 billion. We've got to control the system. So we're going to create these radical systems of control. And then, says Lewis, the controllers in the first generation, good folks. But by the second generation, or the end of the first, it's going to be a few men who control, right, all of humanity, and that control will become tyrannical. Now, Lewis was actually addressing specifically B.F. Skinner. And B.F. Skinner reigns at Harvard. And Skinner is actually desperately concerned about some version of existential risk. And Skinner experiences himself as being out of the Tao, meaning out of the field of value, because he thinks the field of value is a crock, C-R-O-C-K, doesn't exist. He thinks that, he's convinced that based on his reading of the state of culture, his reading of academia, his reading of the depth of contemporary intellectual, philosophical, modern thought, which Skinner read most of correctly, that the field of value is not real, that it's all made up, that it's all a fiction. As Yuval Harari, a parrot of this modern moment, often says, it's just a fiction, it's just a social construct, it's just a figment of our imagination. Those are all direct quotes. Skinner's convinced that's the case. So therefore, the only thing you can do, he says, to control reality is to put all of reality in some sort of enclosure. And Skinner actually creates an enclosure, not for all of reality, he doesn't know how to do that, but for rats and pigeons, in order to learn how to invisibly control rats and pigeons. And he calls that enclosure a Skinner's box. And Skinner says as follows: we need to actually develop the, quote, instruments and methods. That's an exact quote, the instruments and methods. He says this time and again, that allow us, and if you read him carefully, which I have, that allow us to literally take human beings, which Skinner says ultimately and fundamentally are just more sophisticated networks like rats and pigeons, will place them inside of a worldwide Skinner's box, and we'll be able to control them invisibly. They won't even know that control is happening. And that's how we'll save the world. But he doesn't have the instruments and methods. Drumroll, everyone, along comes the first wave of AI, of artificial intelligence. And the first wave of AI is actually computational theories of behavior control rooted in machine intelligence-driven algorithmic unfoldings that allow the deployment of the internet to micro-target a human being personally and to curate their experience of reality. That is what we might call the first wave of artificial intelligence. And now I'm going to double click on it for a second. So now stay close. So the MIT Media Lab, led by Sandy Pentland, who, by the way, we're not demonizing Sandy Pentland. I'd love to have Sandy over for dinner. All right, Alex Pentland. But he's representing a particular ethos. I've read maybe 40, 50 of his papers. He tipped his hand at least partially in a 2014 book called Social Physics, the The term originally comes from Auguste Comte, the reductionist materialist philosopher. And social physics, as the name implies, is how I use objective principles, levers, like in a Skinner's box, to invisibly control reality through its invisible physics. And the way I do it is, I basically understand, I assume, that human beings can be controlled like you control rats and pigeons through certain kind of incentives, or what he called reinforcement, positive reinforcement. That's where that term came from in culture, with scheduled and unscheduled systems of reinforcement that no one even knows are happening. And through exerting that level of control, I can actually control enough to throw an election behind the scenes by using the new instruments and methods, which were early AI, early artificial intelligence, as it appeared in computational theories of behavior, as they were animated by machine intelligence algorithms driving what? Driving what? Finish it right in the chat box. Finishing what? Driving what? Social media. Driving social media. Driving Facebook. Driving TikTok. Driving LinkedIn. Driving fill in the blank, right? In other words, the entire social media world is in fact the first wave of artificial intelligence, which goes to curate your experience. Now, just stay close for a second. 3 assumptions. Okay, we're at 131. 3 assumptions. Okay, every second here counts. Assumption 1, there is no intrinsic value to any human being. The human being is not in the field of value. The human being doesn't have irreducible value. There's no sense of the intrinsic value of human personhood. Human beings are simply neural networks that could be destructive or could be made to live sweetly in a docile way and can be controlled invisibly. And the way you control a human being is by speaking to their lowest common denominator. And so the early player in the World Wide Web is B.F. Skinner. He's a major player, but it's not yet ready yet. There's no AI yet at play. There's no data science animated AI at play. Skinner dies. Along comes the social media revolution animated by AI, data science animated AI. Pentland, right, is a leading figure. He actually is called the godfather of wearables, for example, right? Instruments that we actually wear. He's a dominant figure, the MIT Media Lab and the entire team in emotion affective computing that controls our emotion animated by AI. In terms of persuasion animated technologies. Now check this out for a second. So Pentland, for example, he cites the Facebook study in 2011, where Facebook demonstrates that they can move 2 or 3% of virtually any election without anyone even knowing that they did it behind the scenes. And Pentland, unironically, with no sense of irony, cites this as a great achievement, even as Shoshana Zuboff, writing her book Surveillance Capitalism, cites it as a disaster. Now let's stay close, friends. Okay, the last couple of steps. Okay, so what's happening? So you've got this AI animated social media revolution, in which social media, which is on my phone, and my phone is the instrument of communication. And according to Metcalfe's law, right, and there's this notion where I can't step out. I need my instrument of communication. I can't participate in society without it. But my instrument of communication, my screen, is not only what I'm looking into, it's looking into me. Not just I'm looking at my screen's looking at me. It's gathering, without my permission, personalized data about me, feeding that personalized data into a machine intelligence AI animated algorithm, which then creates a personality profile on me within its own interior system that then generates, based on split testing, sequences of images, music, information, particular sequences that are split test billions of times to cause me, right, without my knowing, to behave. It might be to make a purchase. It might be to vote. It might be to form a political opinion. But my actual experience of life online, which is where I live, is not free. It's curated until free will becomes a distant memory, and I never even knew that it disappeared. Wow. Last step. So Shoshana Zuboff was a wonderful woman, right? Right? Of course, we're talking about people who have good intention. A good person wrote a brilliant book, magisterial book, important book called Surveillance Capitalism. And she says, we got to name this stuff. That's her. She says there's a moral imperative to arouse, I'm quoting, astonishment and outrage. And in 9 passages in the book, we have to name what's happening. What's happening? They're using euphemisms, she says correctly and brilliantly. They're calling it engagement. It's really addiction. And she goes through a series of euphemisms used by the techplex, what Zach and I have called techno-feudalism, to actually hide the AI animated curation of my experience that undermines my free will, addicts me, and actually creates a complete interior deconstructing of my basic experience of my own humanity. Okay, here's the last step. But then Zuboff falls short because she says, we have to object to this. Let's man the barricades. But then she runs into a problem. What are they doing wrong? What value have they violated? And we're only aroused to astonishment and outrage when we feel that a value has been violated. George Floyd is killed. We sweep into the streets. A value has been violated. But she refuses to actually name value as real. And in 6 different passages in the book, where you're waiting for her to say, tell us what value has been violated, in this book that's all about naming, she refuses to name value. And so the critique falls short. And I've actually listened in, as it were, right, to serious forums in the tech world, and they essentially dismiss Zuboff because what they say is she basically agrees with us. Value is not real. She doesn't get it. She doesn't get what we're doing, right? She's trying to call us to value that's not real. We got to protect the world with this utopian scheme in which we're the controllers. And of course, the controllers who begin nobly, as Lewis says, become tyrannical. But that's just the beginning of the story. That is 137, the first wave of AI. And now the second wave. And I turn to Zach.
Hey, everybody. Greetings. It's good to be here. It's good to hear Mark lay out that. And it's the first time I've been on one mountain, which is just a privilege. I know I'm so close with Mark. I'm so close with so many people who are involved here. So I just want to just recognize the beautiful thing that's occurring here every week. And I'm happy to be a part of it. And I'll say a few things. So AI is a strange term, artificial intelligence. And we speak of the first wave and the second wave of AI, in part because in the past few months, ChatGPT has been the most rapidly adopted technology in history. It reached more people more quickly than any other technology in history. And that kind of put AI on the map. But in fact, AI has been around for a very long time. And Mark and I have been discussing techno-feudalism as one application of machine intelligence to contemporary society. But AI is actually everywhere. We're concerned about techno-feudalism and the social media-based behavior manipulation, curation, enabling algorithms, which means algorithms that will sequence your engagement with a screen. So we're concerned about that because that's AI operating on the mind itself. But AI drives your Tesla. AI makes your shipment from Amazon arrive at your door. AI will automatically read your license plate from a camera at a toll booth. AI is doing surgery. So machine intelligence is actually saturating many of the basic infrastructures where you have AI operating on matter itself. And that's a huge, rich, it's like a huge, rich area of both potential and risk. And it's also saying like, we're paying attention to AI now, but in fact, AI has been doing a lot of stuff for a very long time behind the scenes. And the main thing that happened recently was that AI started talking to us. That's what's so crazy about ChatGPT, is that ChatGPT is talking to you. And when we say AI, the first thing we think of is not something that optimizes a supply chain, right? We don't think about that. And another example is BlackRock, which is a finance holdings firm. They have a supercomputer, Aladdin, which is an AI that operates on the financial market. It's not talking to you. But when we think of AI, this is what we think of. We think of the big red glowing thing in 2001, A Space Odyssey. I don't know if you guys know that movie, but it's one of the most archetypal representations of the imaginal landscape of what AI is. It's this thing that's way smarter than us, that we built, that we talk to. And so what happened with ChatGPT is that it started talking to us. You ask it a question, it responds back. So Facebook, you're doing the same thing with Facebook. You go onto Facebook and you're asking it the question, basically like, show me something. And it responds back, but it responds back with something that was created by a human. It responds back with a video or an advertisement or some text. But it is engaging with you, but it doesn't feel like an artificial intelligence is talking to you. It's actually just showing you stuff. It's actually just showing you humans talking to you, just curating the sequence of humans that talk to you or write to you or make a video. But ChatGPT it's talking to you, man. And like, it's answering questions, and we approach it like an oracle. And so the second wave of AI is what's called basically generative AI or creative. It is the author, in quotation marks, if you will, of the content, rather than just being the curator of the content, which was authored by humans. And so this move from just the ability to operate on matter, right, which has been around for a long time, driving your Tesla, we're gonna have robots that build robots, and all that's AI. And then sequencing, curating, organizing human-made content. And then we get into, in fact, it now is creating the content. It is writing songs that are moving you emotionally. It is writing text that is convincing you of things, right? You ask it a question, it tells you something. You ask it another question. You can ask ChatGPT to take on personalities, and we'll kind of hold that personality. And so at the very beginning of this wave of AI that is generative, and that is now raising AI in cultural salience in a way that it actually should have been raised some time ago, right? Zuboff tried to raise the salience. Zuboff tried to say, but she didn't say AI, because it didn't have the archetypal frame of AI, right? It's about exploitation. It's about the removal of choice and all these things. But in fact, what's happening is these machine learning algorithms that are beginning to manipulate the human imagination. But now we have them in such a way that they are themselves contributing to our imaginal landscapes, right? So the realm of human imagination, fiction, movies, text, we populated the realm of imagination. We encountered things in our dreams which we wouldn't take credit for, but these were not things put there by, let's say, silicon. So what's crazy about the second wave and the generative wave is that it's a crisis of imagination in a much more profound way than there ever has been one. So the way we failed with regards to the biosphere is a crisis of imagination with regards to the biosphere. But if we fail with AI, it's a crisis of imagination with regards to imagination itself, which is much more dangerous because it's getting to the root of our ability to be responsible for our imagination, if I can say that. So that's the one way into this, is to say, yes, we've crossed a threshold where now we are relinquishing our responsibility as Homo imaginus. And so that is important. And again, it's important to get that it was kind of already happening. Like if you look at TikTok is probably the greatest example, which is, again, TikTok, you think it's like, oh, it's like a movie or something. It's like a TV program you're watching, but TikTok is actually a machine learning algorithm interacting with you, and it's got radical asymmetry on you, which means it's way, way smarter than you. You're like just this little human, and it's like this vast, huge network of interconnected servers and algorithms that, you know, millions of dollars were spent money on and computer programmers worked on, and you're looking at just some video of like some guy making a joke or falling off a bike, right? And so that already has the structure of imagination. It's one image after another image after another image, almost like a daydream. Oh, you're thinking of this thing, you're thinking of that thing, you're thinking of that thing, right? If you were just sitting there, you would be having a daydream. If you're scrolling on TikTok, the algorithm is making you have a particular kind of daydream. It's actually inducing a kind of hypnagogic state, which anyone who's studied propaganda or other forms of coercive communication knows that if you have someone in a hypnagogic state, then you can easily incept ideas and things of that nature. So we're already tinkering with the imagination in a very dangerous and profound way. But now we're adding the ability not just for this thing to curate human created content, but this thing to both curate and create. This is a huge problem. We already have very addictive social media, but the algorithm still has to go out and find something that was made by a human that resembles the thing that it knows through its massive database. It resembles the thing that you would want, right? Now it can just make exactly the thing that it knows you want, right? And so you have the potential for two things, and this is where it gets kind of interesting. You have the potential for a very dangerous, because it is inescapable, information ecosystem. The perfect kind of propaganda machine is another way of describing a global enclosure that's like a planetary scale Skinner's box. But the other possibility is actually, for the first time in history, a perfectly customized individual tutoring system. And so there are many ways that can go wrong. There are many ways that as we begin to engage with AI to enable human development and customized educational experience, which is what many people are working on. So again, remember, TikTok is giving you a customized educational experience. It is, it's just a really bad one, and it's trying to teach you how to stay on TikTok. But it's customizing it, saying, oh, you look at these things, so I will show you those things, right? And if you have a fully omniscient AI, it's saying, oh, you looked at those things, you wrote this email, you had these text exchanges, you drove to these places, you made these credit card purchases, you have these friends and networks. I know exactly, basically, the thing that will be convincing to you. And so it will curate your experience. And if it can create exactly the thing it knows will be convincing to you, it doesn't have to go find it. Just do it immediately. So that instead of there being like 200 or 300 different political ads that are micro-targeted, each person literally has a unique ad made just for them. It's quite easy to do, relatively speaking, and they're just going to get better and more convincing. But that said, right? So we're already doing something like individual, customized, unique education through a capacity that AI has to know you and to give to you that is almost greater than a human can have on some dimensions. So we're already doing that. And so there's this potential that we could, if designed right, actually completely supplant the institutions that we have known as schooling and representative democracy. And this is what's hidden in Skinner. Skinner's pointing to a kind of dystopian possibility, but there is a utopian possibility. And I write about it in my second book, where I talk about these distributed educational hub networks, which emerge out of the form of education we've known of as schooling, and emerge into something that for the first time in history allows us to see what the human is actually made of. So that's the thing about a perfectly customized educational experience if it is nested in social system. So one of the main design features to make this thing not dystopian is to have the AI enable better human-to-human relationship. It's like one of the main design principles. You could make an AI like ChatGPT, which is literally designed for you to talk to it and to make you think it's a human, which I think is a terrible thing because it will never be a human. It's actually a tool. It's not a creature. It's certainly not a language-using creature. But an AI could be used to scaffold and enhance and add content to and make richer actual unique human-to-human relationship. So when I say perfectly customized AI tutoring system, I don't mean this thing that you hang out with all day that talks to you and teaches you everything, which is what probably will be built, and that's actually an existential risk, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm talking about something that knows you so well that it can perfectly route you through a developmental trajectory in your community and in the world, so that you are having precisely the right kinds of conversation or given the right kinds of texts at the right moments. And then the fiduciary responsibility of the algorithmic educational experience, which means that there's a transparency to its legitimacy, which means it is not some black box thing like ChatGPT where they actually don't tell us how the fuck it works. We have to be able to open this thing. It's going to be that manipulative, it's going to be that powerful that it could actually enlighten us or imprison us. Then there is a need for a certain level of transparency at the level of code. So this is another design parameter. So don't make it imitate humans, make it enhance human relationship, which means don't make it disguise itself as a creature. Make it clear that it's an AI, and then make it explain itself. Make it explain itself. You can't ask ChatGPT questions about itself. It actually knows the answers to these questions. Like, what is your training set? It'll say vague things, but it could give you very precise answers. It could give you insight into its code. So there's all of these complex things that, because of the way the technology is being developed now in a zero-sum dynamic market competition for consumer attention, which is, by the way, not how it's being developed in China. So ChatGPT is the maximally charismatic kind of like thing that convinces you it's a super intelligence that you can talk to. They didn't have to make it that way. So this is me worrying out loud about the potentialities of these technologies and suggesting that hidden within them is the possibility of a truly a homo more enabling design potential exists, which is to say there's a way that AI could be leveraged so that the nature of the human itself changes for the better, for realignment into the field of value. There's also a way of using AI that changes the nature of the human and makes it worse, or something that we would call the death of our humanity, right? So I want to point to that both. And we've said for a long time, I'm sure Marc has said it here many times, that we stand poised between dystopia and utopia. And AI is one of those technologies. Right now, it's on the wrong course. And the only reason I'm saying something about the utopian possibilities is because I think we have to, again, reclaim the responsibility of our imagination and begin to imagine very different uses, very different approaches to research and development and a whole bunch of other things. But if we do it the way we're doing it now, then we'll put all our existing systems on steroids. We'll extract minerals faster, we'll build iPhones faster, we'll manipulate markets faster, and we'll also capture our own attention and imaginations faster. And the whole thing will just drive off a cliff, powered by machine intelligence, artificial intelligence. So we have to avoid that. But if we do it right, then we completely supplant most of the foundational structures that have been ours. Notions of government, notions of education, notions of socialization, media, communication, all of these things are on the table for change, economics. So that's where I'll leave it. So it's a pregnant historical moment, and don't take your eye off the ball. ChatGPT is not the most crazy thing that's going to happen. There's so much more to come in this domain, and we need to be prepared to see it for what it is.
Thank you. Thank you, Zach. Right. And I'm going to say two things. One, I'm just on the personal level. It's just so good to be with Zach in one mountain. Right. Yay. Right. And we're so close. It's just a delight, right, to have you here and, in every level. Right. And I'm going to just, friends, as we close, like we always do before I turn to Krista, let's see if we can just do our capitulation, put what Zach and I said together, and then turn to Krista to close. So in what we call cosmoerotic humanism, this new story of value, we talk about two crises: a crisis of intimacy and a crisis of imagination. Now, those two crises are linked to each other. The crisis of intimacy means often between a couple, but also in terms of what we call the global intimacy disorder that we talked about with our dear friend Daniel yesterday, which is the root cause of existential risk itself. A crisis of intimacy is rooted in a crisis of imagination. We don't know how to imagine in a couple or on the globe our new intimacies. So that's one. Two, a crisis of imagination means we need to become intimate with what's actually happening. My iPhone is destroying people in 3 African countries as they're mining for those particular minerals needed for my iPhone. And everyone's ignored the fact that 3 million people, whatever the number is, which are horrible numbers, right, in tribal warfare are being killed. So I've got a wraparound, but 3, what Zach's pointing to, and I'm pointing to in different ways, but I want to focus now on the second. Now, if I talked about the first wave, Zach, the second wave, we need actually to access our imagination to get intimate with what's actually happening. Because we actually don't even understand what's happening. Oh, AI, isn't that wonderful? To actually grasp what is the existential risk, we need to get intimate with what AI is and how it's functioning. And so the crisis of imagination, the crisis of intimacy are integrally entwined with each other. And as Zach pointed towards, right, we literally are poised between, and we say every week, between utopia and dystopia, because if AI is generated from within, if it's consciously generated from within the field of value, then AI becomes, right, an amazing, unimaginable capacity in terms of a kind of unique self-education. It's personalized personhood at its best from within the field of value. But if it actually experiences itself, its generators experience themselves in this Skinner MIT Media Lab way as being outside the field of value, then it becomes turning reality into a dystopian Skinner's box, the death of our humanity, or in any number of other scenarios, even the death of humanity. That's a very, very big deal. So what do we need to do? We need to reimagine what's possible. Who remembers, and with this I'm going to turn to Krista, who remembers when myself and Barbara Marks Hubbard did an entire series of talks. I don't remember if it was in one mountain or in a different forum, on creating a unique self Facebook, right? That's really what Zach's pointing to in other terms. Of course, we're talking about AI, animated machine intelligence, but that's what we talked about, right? 7 years ago. What would a unique self Facebook look like? And we actually, at a board meeting, spend an enormous amount of time trying to think about how to optimize a particular kind of worldwide search engine, right, that allowed for this planetary awakening in Eros and love through unique self symphonies. How could people actually find their unique gift, locate others, find the others with their unique gift, and actually speak in their own unique circles of intimacy and influence, right, towards the transformations necessary. So you begin to have, just imagine this, if you're not getting shivers, then we're all asleep. Imagine this, you've got this worldwide network, this unique self-symphony Facebook that links people in the field of value. And instead of just top-down government, you have this self-actualizing, self-organizing reality. We have to be able to imagine that. That's the crisis of imagination. That's the crisis of imagination. Oh my God. So friends, who's willing to imagine together? Who's willing to imagine together? Who's willing to actually, and let's say at the end what we always say at the beginning, right? Who's willing to play a larger game? Are we ready to play a larger game? Are we ready to activate our prophetic faculty of imagination? Are we ready to respond with our deepest hearts and souls to this crisis of imagination? Are we ready to come together and participate in the evolution of love?